Hi there. Today I'm going to talk about problematic pistols, and every few weeks I have a coffee with an old friend of mine, Mac, who used to be our main gunsmith in Liverpool, and he was also a very keen competitive shooter. He doesn't live in Liverpool anymore, but when he comes over we always get together. And the other week I mentioned I was preparing this video, and straight away he came up with a recommendation for one of the most problematic pistols ever, which was the Rogak pistol. And he reminded me of a review that was done in an American magazine where they termed it a Jammermatic. And the Rogak was actually a copy of the Steyr GB. The Steyr was designed to be the service pistol for the Austrian forces. That was the intention. And it wasn't too successful. However, an American company, Rogak, without any authority, without a license, copied it. And they did it in a quite an egregious manner. The metallurgy was terrible, etc. And it was sent out for review, and it failed dismally. So it kind of becomes a synonym for what I call problematics, pistols that just don't work. And then the original, the Steyr, which wasn't that bad, really, except it was quite large and clunky and didn't really do anything that numerous other pistols didn't do, was eclipsed by the development again within Austria of the Glock 17, which, as we know, has subsequently taken both the military and the law enforcement market by storm all over the world. So there are several qualities a fighting handgun needs, and reliability is the first. The gun must work. If it doesn't, everything else, accuracy, ergonomics, etc., are irrelevant. The pistol must function reliably. So how reliable should it be? Well, 100% reliability is not attainable in a man-made mechanical device. However, 99% is unacceptable. I wouldn't own a pistol that malfunctioned every one round in 100. So we must get reliability up as close to 100% as is humanly possible. Problematics don't even approach 99%. They fail at the rate of 1 round per magazine, or even worse. Now, by a problematic, we don't mean an individual example. We can always have a lemon, a Monday morning pistol or a Friday afternoon pistol. We find this in anything that's been manufactured. Cars, computers, kitchen devices. You can always get a lemon. An example of this is my first Glock, which was a Glock 19, worked very well, except it shot low. I took it to the range. At close range, obviously it wasn't that much of a problem, but at longer ranges and in quite a few of the training exercises and courses of fire and qualifications, you had to shoot at longer ranges, and it did shoot low. I persevered, and then I got rid of it, and but I bought another Glock 19 because I really liked the pistol, and that one worked, shot spot on, and it was just as reliable. So that was a lemon, the one that shot low. So I'm not lumping all the Glocks into the same category. although as we will see a little bit later, they can have their shortcomings. Back in the dark ages when I started shooting, the received wisdom was that semi-automatics jam. However, a lot of the problems were not actually the pistol but the ammunition. Many of the pistols back then were designed to work with military issue ammunition, what we tend to call hardball, jacketed ammunition, with a very smooth profile. And guys would put exotic hand loads or hollow points and try to get them to feed, and then blame the pistol. Pistol would work with the ammunition it was designed for. However, cottage industry grew up around making pistols feed ammunition successfully, polishing the feed ramp, reprofiling it and so on, checking the magazine lips, all this kind of thing. And eventually these changes, modifications were adopted by the manufacturers. So after about the mid-70s to the 80s, the pistol started being manufactured to feed all types of ammunition. So then the status of the semi-automatic pistol was viewed as being reliable. Now, having said that, revolvers can have problems too. I remember when in 1976 at the World match in Austria, on our team, on the British team, the only bad stoppage was with a revolver, and it jammed completely solidly, and it needed a gunsmith to get it open. So when revolvers fail, quite often they fail catastrophically, whereas with the semi-autos there's quite often stoppage drills which can get the pistol back into action rather quickly. But an example of the problems you can have with a revolver came in the Smith & Wesson K-frame 357 Magnums, and firing full-on loads through them with any kind of regularity could batter them out of time. And Smith & Wesson actually got rather upset by people returning them to the factory, and blamed the shooters for using 357 rounds in a pistol that was marked 357. And I myself, I did own a Model 19. It was my first pistol, and I did fire a lot of full bat 357 loads through it. However, I didn't have it long enough for it to become a problem. Within a year, I transitioned into semi-automatic pistol, and although I have owned revolvers since, all my main shooting was done with semi-autos. And just as an aside, Terry, Gary and myself all started off with Smith 357s. As I say, I had the Model 19. Terry went for the Model 27, which was the kind of upmarket finish to a 357, and it was on the larger end frame, and the finish was really nice. Gary went for the Model 28, known as the Highway Patrolman, which also an end frame, and the finish wasn't regarded as being as nice as the 27, but I actually preferred it. It was a darker finish. It was almost black, and I liked it. I liked the look of it. and really I would have been better with the Model 28, because as regards carrying it, it's only small increments, and if you can't conceal a Model 28, you're probably not going to be able to conceal a 19. The first real jammatic or problematic that I really encountered was a Egypt, which was a version of the Soviet pre-World War II designed Tokarev, which had been made by one of the satellite countries at the time, Hungary, and chambered for 9mm instead of the original bottleneck cartridge. And it was then supplied to Egypt for their military. And a chap came on several of our pistol courses, and he owned a Egypt, and it was an absolute disaster. So typically we'd start a drill, he'd be on the firing line, and signal to fire, or the targets would turn, and he'd come up and get a click. He'd then try to remedy the stoppage, and by the time he was back in battery, the drill was over. And this just went on and on. It was farcical. We didn't have phones in those days with videos, but I would have loved to have videoed it, because it was a real teaching point. I wanted to say that the only thing he got from the training was learning how to clear stoppages, but he didn't even do that successfully, because the stoppages were so varied and so deep that there was no learning benefit to it at all. I just can't understand owning a pistol like that. Either you'd take it to be fixed, or you'd bin it and get something else. Because the amount he wasted on course fees and so on, where he didn't get any training benefit. A more modern, that was an old pre-war design, and a more modern, even futuristic design I encountered was the CP1, which was manufactured by Vector in South Africa, and I'd seen it in the South African gun magazine, and we were running a course, and a couple who were both firearms instructors had their own training set up. Bart and Samantha turned up, and they each had a CP1. I asked them how it was, and they said, yeah, it was great. Had been returned to the factory for a problem, but it had come back and all the bugs had been worked out, and it was fine. So, okay, all's good. Course started, and it was a failure. Probably not as bad as a Tokarev, but just stoppage. To the point where I loaned Samantha my SIG 228, and she used it for the duration of the course and was enamored with it. And actually, as far as I remember, they both bought SIGs after the course. Another category or source of pistols were some of the Spanish pistols, Iyama and Star, and their main failure was the metallurgy. They're very, very suspect. I actually, after my Model 19 revolver, I really wanted a 45, but at the particular time they didn't seem to be in great supply, particularly on the second-hand market. And I actually tried out a 9mm Starlight, which was quite a nice pistol, except for the fact that it blew up. So back to the drawing board, and I ended up with an old 1936 commercial Colt, which I had modified, and I had it until Tony Blair took our pistols off us. Early stainless auto pistols were hailed as a great step forward, but unfortunately stainless steel has a problem known as galling, where when you have stainless against stainless, you get this drag and friction. Works great for revolvers. I had a snubby, a Smith Model 60, and in stainless. That was a stainless pistol. Worked fine, not a problem. But for some reason in autos, it's a problem. If you have the slide in stainless and the frame normal steel or aluminium, that will work. There was the first one I remember was the AMT hardballer, which we call the oddballer, and another I think was possibly offered by Mossberg in the dim recess of my memory, was used by a guy I know in UK Special Forces. He took it to the jungle and it just rusted solid. Another stainless pistol which really gave problems was the Mamba, which was designed in Rhodesia. Initially prototypes were built there, and then it was farmed out to South Africa, and it was actually, one was given as a prize at the IPSC World Shoot. So I did actually get to handle it, and all I can say, it was a big chunky 9mm pistol. Loads of problems, loads of manufacturing problems and so on, and it just wasn't a success at all. The Colt 2000 All-American. This was reviewed in one of the American gun mags by one of the fairly well-known gun writers. And I've got to interject here. I used to read lots of, I think I subscribed to about 5 of the American gun mags at one time. And I later met some of the gun writers, and some of them literally can't shoot. They can't shoot for toffee. Some of them, people like Dave Spalding, were really good shooters and knew what they were talking about. But many of the others were just guys who really they knew how to write, but their actual shooting skills were lacking. And this chap wrote a glowing review of this Colt 2000 from a review model that was sent to him, but the actual pistol as manufactured was a total failure, and it was very quickly removed from sales. The Bren 10 was a design with a lot of influence from Colonel Cooper. Colonel Cooper reckoned that the CZ75 was a very, very decent design. In many ways it was ideal, except it was in 9mm. And from my own experience, I never owned a CZ, but it was the pistol that was supplied on many of our bodyguard courses. The range we used had a whole stock of them, and we gave them to the guys, and they were fine, they worked fine. I did shoot them quite a bit, and they were a joy to shoot. So the colonel took it, and he thought the 10mm cartridge would be the ideal replacement for the 45, because it would be more flat shooting, and put the two things together and came out with the Bren 10. Unfortunately, the people who manufactured it, Dornas and Dixon, ran into lots and lots of problems. And one of the main problems is their subcontractor who made the magazines failed to fulfill the requirements. So even though the pistols could have been available, the magazines weren't. And the magazines became sought after. A pistol was used in Miami Vice by the Don Johnson character, famously, and there's a story, possibly apocryphal, of people going to the locations in Miami where he dropped magazines doing reloads and looking just in case there were any on the floor. The pistol itself was good. I've shot both the 10 and the 45 versions, and a friend had one, and he had, I've got to say, 10 magazines with it. He must have mortgaged his house to get them, and it was a decent pistol, but as I say, it wasn't put into a sufficiently decent marketing and manufacturing phase. Now the Glock, as I mentioned earlier, I did have a Lemon, but there is kind of a theory that the Glock works best in its original caliber, which is 9mm, and you don't really hear much about the 9mm giving problems. People may like them and they may dislike them. They may like the Gen 4s or the Gen 5s or dislike them, but you don't really hear much in the way of problems. However, with some of the other calibers, notably the 40, it seemed that Glock rushed out the 40, the Model 22, quickly in order to jump in the market, and there were problems with it, quite severe problems. Likewise with the 10mm. Other problems I've personal knowledge of, guys from one of the police departments we were training in the States, they were issued the 40s with weapon mounted lights. That's another issue, whether you think weapon mounted lights are a good idea, but there were stoppages galore, and they switched to an H&K which accepted the light and didn't give many problems. I've been around pistols for a long time and fairly familiar with most of them, but out with the police in South Africa, and we were doing roadblocks, and one of the constables called me over, and he'd found this guy was carrying a pistol, and the constable wanted me to clear it for him, and this was the most dangerous looking pistol, or dangerous sort of appearing pistol I've ever seen. First of all, I've no idea what it was, where it was made or whatever. It was a small, probably a short 9mm or some other caliber. Half of the grip on the left side was missing, so you could see right through it. It was rusty, and I was actually quite apprehensive about clearing it, because some of these designs you can have an accidental discharge. There is a negligent discharge, which is shooter error, but accidental discharges are faults of the pistol. So I went through obviously removed the magazine first, and then racked the slide back, found out if there was a slide hold open catch. I don't think there was. Anyway, the guy, his documentation was okay, it was in order, and we sent him on his way. But the thing is, in Africa, quite often people just can't afford to buy decent weapons, and some of the junk you do see being carried to save people's lives is more dangerous to the user. We come to Ruger. They entered the auto pistol market with the P85, and then some later models, the 89, I think it was the next one. Now Ruger make great revolvers. I had a Ruger Security 6, beautiful revolver. In my opinion, better really than the Smith & Wessons. But their autos, not so much. And the P-Series really got off to a bad start. And at one of the training conferences, the banquet at the end, they have a prize raffle. And they announced that the first prize was a Ruger auto pistol. And I turned to the guys and I said, second prize is 2 of them, because the reputation was that bad. Now we come to the SIG 320, which is actually the issue weapon for the American military pistol. There's been since my 228, there's been a lot of Ruger designs, and I haven't actually fired many of them, I've got to admit, and I have never fired the 320. However, reports are coming in that it's very problematic, and the problem is ADs, accidental discharges in the holster, things like this. It's a mechanical issue. I don't think anybody's completely identified what the problem is, except that there is a problem. And SIG is tearing its hair out, because it did have a really good reputation, and this has kind of put them on the back foot in a big way. And if they had to recall it, it would be financially disastrous. As instructors and commentators, we've got to be honest. If something doesn't work, or if there's a problem with a piece of life-saving equipment, it's got to be made public. You know, it's been similar things in the past with particular holsters that can cause problems, can cause accidental discharges, and it's got to be identified and let people know. So, to wrap up, there have been problems, as we've seen from some of the designs, from almost all the major manufacturers: Colt, Smith & Wesson, SIG and Ruger, and Glock. Looking back, I tried to think of any problems with Heckler & Koch, and I racked my brain, and I've never heard of the H&K pistols, and they go back quite a long way. P9S and so on, VP70s. I've never heard of any of them right up to present time being problematic. So perhaps they are the exception. The only problem I had with my P7 was at a training event, and I was training in a class under John Farnham, a chap who I'd really wanted to train with, and he was putting us through a drill, which was a really, really useful drill. It's a drill I've adopted, and I taught it very, very widely. Always credited John for it because it was his idea. So we're going through this drill with my P7, and I had bought Blazer ammunition for the course. Blazer is aluminium cased. I'd used it in my Glock and I'd used it in the SIG. What I didn't know is it's not recommended for the P7 or the MP5, and you get failures to extract. So I ended up with a terrible stoppage, which took me an amazing amount of time to clear. I eventually did clear and completed the drill, and I think John had to time me with a calendar rather than with a timer. But he did say to me, well, you never gave up the fight, and that's an important lesson. I was fortunately able to swap the Blazer for another type of training ammo and complete the conference with it. But it was a lesson. It was completely my fault, because in the P7 manual it did mention don't use Blazer, but like most guys, you don't read the manual. Now, if you're entering the firearms market, it's possible to get second-hand bargains from all the major manufacturers. If you go into any of the gun stores, you can drool over the plethora of second-hand and fairly inexpensive models that are there. So there's no excuse to scrimp. Even though I've outlined problems with weapons from some of the major manufacturers, they're the ones really I would recommend. They have the resources to correct problems. If you buy a new pistol, you should put at least 200 rounds of your carry ammunition or your service ammunition through it in all types of drills: slow fire, fast as possible, support hand, firing from different positions. Always use quality magazines. Use the recommended ammo. Learn from my problem with Blazer. And use the correct maintenance and cleaning procedures. Now, a Glock, for example, the lubrication on a Glock is 3 drops of oil. I loaned my 19 to Clint to shoot on a course because he was thinking of buying a Glock. He shot probably about 500-600 rounds through it, and he was cleaning it, and he used that much oil on it. It was like a Greek salad at the end. For weeks afterwards, there was oil coming out of it. So you don't need that. Don't over lubricate it, but use the type of lubricant. The modern lubricants are great. So that's it. The good, the bad, and the ugly regarding problematics. Don't be disheartened. These are the exceptions, and you can go a whole shooting career without experiencing one of these problems. But I hope that illuminates some insights on this for you.